Eva, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased to see how many you are. But I have to admit, I'm pretty nervous, and I'm not that expert. No, that's not true. I think Tappan is. I want to tell you a short story about this boatyard in Sweden. I have worked in the Maritime Museum in Stockholm for more than 25 years. And one of my first missions was to document a collection of photos from this boatyard, Tore Holm's boatyard in Gamleby. And the interest had followed me during all these years. So it's very nice to be here. The Holm Boat Building Company had its active period between 1905 and 1955. But by then, sailing for pleasure had already had a long history. The first sailing society in Sweden was the KSSS, founded 1830. And the yachtmen's mecca was Sandhamn outside Stockholm. In Sandhamn, the wealthy sportsmen met for racing and for showing off their boats. And in the early 20th century, the boats from Gamleby came to be well represented. The Gamleby village is situated on the northern coast of the province of Småland. It was a prosperous place with a number of employers, like a sawmill, a stonemasonry, and a carpentry, and from approximately 1905 there was also the Holm's boatyard. And I want to show you this map. Now I see if I can handle this. Up there, Stockholm, and you can see my shape. And Gamleby is up there. So it's approximately 300 kilometers between Stockholm and Gamleby. Business was flourishing and new communications made the transport of people as well as cargo easy. Steamers and small sailing vessels put in at the harbor, and the trains roll into the station. Job opportunities were abundant, and there was no need for higher education to get a job. Peasants and craftsmen sold their commodities on the marketplace, and modern stress was an unknown phenomenon. And this is a photo from the old marketplace in Gamleby. And it still looks the same today. It's very, very nice, small marketplace, very picturesque. But nowadays there is a new marketplace 1 kilometer from the old one. The man who was to make Gamleby a household name within the sailing community was Tore Holm. Born in 1864, he started his career as a seaman on sailing vessels going to America. Knut became impressed with the United States and stayed there for a decade. Knut was adventurous. In America, he got involved with sailing and took part as yachtsman on regattas. This is Knut. And the lower photos showing Knut on board the great 55 square meters Mayflower. I think you all know about Mayflower because she's here in Finland. One of the boats was named Mayflower, and the name was to remain with him for the rest of his life. Several of the skerry cruisers from Gamleby were called Mayflower. And when Tore, years later, had an apartment building constructed in the 40s, it was called Mayflower as well. Knut was a multi-faced man. Besides sailing, he also liked to perform on stage, and in the States he was both a playhouse actor and an operetta singer. But after that he decided to get back to Sweden and start boat building. Back in Gamleby again, Knut fell in love with Anna, a beautiful girl whom he married and with whom he had 3 kids in quick succession. Yngve in 1895, Tore 1896, and Magda 1898. Anna was a strong-willed woman who would not let herself be pushed around, and she was thus probably exactly the kind of partner Knut needed. Their quarrels were well known in the village, but the battles were seldom serious and the couple always made up. Even today the story is told about the occasion when Knut held his wife by her ankles over the balcony rail. Anna was not afraid and shouted, "Let me go if you dare." Naturally, Knut didn't drop his wife but pull her back in again. Gamleby had his own sailing society. The GSS had been established as early as 1880. It recruited its members from the upper class in Gamleby, and they met and raced on Gamlebyviken, the Bay of Gamleby. Even though Gamleby was a small place, the class divisions were quite substantial at the time. Knut was a good sailor as well as a singer-entertainer. As previously in America, he was an appreciated hand on the boats and popular character at the party afterwards. The GSS had a pavilion on one of the islands in the bay where the members spent time after regattas and on weekends. And this photo is from the outside the pavilion, and it's Knut in the middle of the photo. At the beginning of the 20th century, Knut got the great idea to build his own boat. Before that, he just get an extra hand on the other boats. But now he wants his own boat. The boat was a modern fin keel racer. I don't know if that's the correct word. Do you understand fin keel racer? Okay. And Knut expected it would be the quickest boat in Gamleby. He hired 2 skilled carpenters, and the boat was built in a shed. Knut made the classic mistake. He didn't take into account the size of the boat, and when it was ready for launching, it was impossible to get it out of the building. Knut had to put down the walls. The boat was called Breeze, and Breeze became the starting shot for the Holm boatyard era. This is Breeze before launching. And I think it must be Tore and Yngve beside the boat, and maybe it's Magda in the hatch. I guess so. The 3 kids had to learn sailing very early in their childhood. When the boatyard activity started, the kids were around 10 years old. And Knut would let them sail as often as they had an opportunity. Commercial boat building started quite modestly in the early years. It was when the skerry cruiser rule was adopted in 1908 that this business speeded up. Hundreds of skerry cruisers were built in the first 20 years. The first boats built in Gamleby were drafted by designers like Salander and Schüssler, but the drawings were just stamped Holms Yachtvarv, alltså Holm boatyard. This is a photo of a 75 square meters designed by Erik Salander, and it's called Dordy. It's an extremely high skerry cruiser, but that depends on the man who ordered the boat. It was Fredrik Ljungström, if you have heard of him, Ljungström Cruisers. So this was one of his first boats. And Salander wouldn't admit he was the man behind the boat, but it was a good racing boat, and then he admit, yes, he designed it. It's therefore impossible to know who the designer really was in those early days. It could be anyone of the family members or somebody else. We knew that Yngve and Tore made drawings when they were just teenagers. And when Tore had finished his studies at the Royal Institute of Technology, many of the designs by Knut and Yngve were attributed to him, since the engineering degree would lend more prestige to a plan, and thus make it fetch a higher price. Maybe even Magda was one of the designers, but if she was, I'm sure they keep it secret because a boat designed by a woman would probably be impossible to sell at the time. This is the little sister Magda. She was an actor, and this photo is from one of her most famous films. It's from The Girl in Tales. But we do know that Magda had her own boat and sailed a lot when she was in her early 20s. It was the two boys who inherited their father's interest in design, and Magda who got on with the theater. The boatyard had its peak during the 20s and 30s. The most popular boats at that time were skerry cruisers, but international rule boats were also common. I can't pinpoint the secret behind the success of Holm's boatyard, but it can be assumed that manpower was cheaper in Gamleby and that it was easier to hire skilled carpenters there than in Stockholm. And this must have made the boats less expensive to produce. And this, I'm sure all of you have seen these photos before. It's taken just outside the boatyard, and it's a 95, a 75, a 55, a 40, and a 30 square meter skerry cruisers. Isn't it beautiful? Almost all of the boat equipment was made in Gamleby. Apart from the boats, the boatyard made masts, mountings, keels, cushions, and inside fittings. The boats could be delivered fully equipped with everything, even food. Usually the delivery took place in Gamleby, but the boats could also be sailed to the customer's home port. This sail transport was often carried out by members of the family, but sometimes it was made by boatyard employees skilled at sailing. I have interviewed a few people from Gamleby as early as 1989 when I started my job at the museum. And all the people I have interviewed remember their time at the boatyard with great fondness. And this is a photo from inside the boatyard. Most of the photos is taken outside of the boats, of course. But this is the team who build these famous boats. The weight was very low, but the companionship nonetheless very strong. Many a tale was told during my conversations. For example, about political discussions were held in the smithy. Communists and social democrats clashed there, and sometimes the discussion would be quite loud. Everybody remember Mrs. Hegart, who together with her husband was one of the customers. She once stepped in a tin of green paint. Since removing the paint proved hard, she went to the painter and had the other shoe painted in the same color. The Employees were proud of the work and of what they accomplished. They controlled and commented each other's work, not out of cruelty, just for teasing. This is one more of the few photos from inside the boatyard. If a plug was inserted askew somewhere in the hull, the colleagues commented on it. And when nobody was looking, the workers changed it. Tore Holm is described by my interviewees as a headstrong man, hard to understand and a bit quiet and sullen, but reliable and fair. Yngve's personality was exactly the opposite. He was cheerful and jovial, and my sources brightened up when they spoke about him. This is Yngve to the left and Tore to the right, together with a friend of them. They are very young at this photo, around 1920, something like that. Maybe the photo is taken on their way to the Olympic Games in Antwerpen, 1920. I don't know, but one might think that the boatyard would have been respected and held in high esteem by the people of Gamleby, but that was not the case. It was just an establishment amongst others and nothing more. Of course, everyone knew that the workers at Holm's boatyard were very competent craftsmen, but not more so than other carpenters in the neighborhood. A lot of people made their living by various kinds of handicraft, and many were very capable. This is a photo from the opposite side of the Gamleby Bay, called Solna. So you can see let's see if I can use this again. This is the boatyard here. And that's the house Tore let build in the 40s, called Majblom or Mayflower. And it's still called Majblom in Gamleby. And the big house that Knut built for himself, I'm not sure, but I think it's some of these houses. So he could sit in the window and look down on his boatyard. That must have been nice for him, I think. Most of the inhabitants in Gamleby know each other, or so it seems. When Knut built his first boat, he got help from two carpenters he knew, Mosse and Gustafsson. We can assume that these two were with the company from the very beginning. Gustafsson had two sons, Martin and Daniel, who belonged to the team's inner circle. This is one of the earliest photos from inside the boatyard. And I don't know the name of the people on the photo, but I can guess that Mosse and Gustafsson is amongst them. I have had the privilege to meet Daniel for an interview in 1989. He was 90 years old at the time, but he still remembers events and details from more than 50 years at the boatyard. Daniel told me he started working for Holm when he was 14. His brother Martin had already been there for a while when Knut asked him if he hadn't a brother who needed something to do. And yes, he had. So Daniel started with common tasks like riveting and similar things. But very soon the old man realized Daniel's talent. And in a few years Daniel advanced to planking the hulls. This was the most important work, and Daniel planked boats like big skerry cruisers as well as minesweepers. His and his partner Harald Pettersson's work was a guarantee for high quality at Holm's boatyard. Daniel enjoyed his work, even if it could be unnerving when he had to hurry. The material was expensive and waste was not seen but with kind eyes. Daniel was also responsible for teaching new carpenters how to do planking. He did it gladly, but in a few cases it did not work when the trainees had no sensibility for the material. Some of Holm's customers belong to Sweden's most wealthy families. They order a large number of boats from Gamleby, and Tore struck up friendship with some of them. As early as 1921, the extremely rich wholesaler and publicist Erik Åkerlund ordered a 95 square meter skerry cruiser called Britt-Marie, and later several 6 meters. This is a photo from one of the first tours with Britt-Marie. And Tore Holm is with them. I can't see from here. There is Tore. And that's Knut, I think. And I think the rest of them are the family, the Åkerlund family. The ship owner and renowned sailor Sven Salén ordered several 6 meters and sailed a lot with Tore, both in Sweden and abroad. He also ordered the biggest boat ever built in Gamleby, the ocean cruiser Havsörnen 2. And it's still sailing in the Mediterranean nowadays. It's a beautiful boat. To the people that I interviewed, the Havsörnen 2 stood out as the most memorable boat ever constructed at the boatyard. Everyone mentioned her mast. At the time she was built in 1937, the whole workforce had been needed to carry the mast to the crane. But the absolutely most respected and popular customer was Gösta Åhlén, the man behind Åhléns department store in Sweden. And this is a beautiful photo, isn't it? It's Tore and one of his best friends, Gösta Åhlén. They are so cute. Gösta and Tore became close friends, and when he visited the boatyard, it was an occasion for celebrating. He treated the whole staff to sandwiches and beer and spoke with everyone in a very kind and friendly manner. He was known to be popular as executive among his own staff as well. The boatyard built a big ocean cruiser for Gösta in 1943. And this photo is from launching Maribel. And they look very happy, and I'm sure they really was. It's real happiness because it was for Gösta Åhlén. Her name was Maribel, as I already said, and she's still under sail. When Tore was 60 and Gösta 52, the two friends went on a big adventure. Together with 4 friends, they sailed with Maribel to West India. Tore's family was not too happy with Tore's decision, but everything went well and the crew returned happily back to Sweden. The journey resulted in a film and a book. This is Maribel under sail. Beautiful book, and she is in Norway nowadays. At the boatyard, the economy was wobbly. Tore's only interest were sailing and boat design. Money was nothing he cared about. The important thing was the boats. The insecure financial circumstances forced the company to lay off parts of the workforce in periods. In the early 1950s, these periods became longer, and the workers sensed that the end was approaching. Tore's friends in Stockholm tried to help with new orders and economic assistance, but it wasn't enough. In the mid-1950s, Tore had to close his company. And that's what's my short story about the Holm boatyard. Thank you.